those people that they've lost, they generally talk about those little moments that you're talking about. That's what they remember. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that come up. And I think it's so important for us to take time, and particularly when we are with people that mean a lot to us and we love a lot, is to just be with them.
Are you looking for a way to drive growth, sales, communication, and retention in your academy? Kovar System's 6-month Program Director course is designed to help members of your team thrive in the important role of Program Director. With step-by-step training, we will cover a wide range of topics, including prospect follow-up, overcoming objection, and securing enrollments. Our program will teach your team members to effectively communicate the values and benefits of martial arts, which can be a game changer in securing more enrollments at your academy. Our next 6-month course starts on this date. So don't wait and visit our site, www.kovarsystems.com, to get your team enrolled in the upcoming course. Again, that's www.kovarsystems.com. Enroll now and get ready to see some real results in your business.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters Podcast, the ultimate resource for ambitious, hardworking school owners that want to get their business and their life to the next level. My name is Dave Kovar. I'm a lifetime martial artist, business owner, speaker, and author. My goal is to empower listeners with the knowledge and the tools they need to break through barriers and really get their business and their life to the next level. Thanks for watching and enjoy.
Welcome to the Satori Masters Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kovar, and assisting me today is Master Chris Natzke. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
All right. Chris and I have been friends for a really long time. I wouldn't 25 years,
something
maybe,
like that,
something like that. And Chris is really an interesting guy, really an amazing guy. He's for whatever it's worth, he's Bill Wallace's top student. Been trained with him forever. A world-class martial arts athlete. Ran a school of your own for years and years, and now oversees several schools.
Correct.
You coach other schools, and you do a lot now. You've kind of taken the lessons of martial arts and you kind of brought them into the real world. And so the presentation that you do now for, let's say, corporate audiences, what are you really focusing on?
Yeah, what we're doing is really taking the lessons that you learn in the dojo and the dojang and taking out in the world and in the corporate world. And because I believe each of us has a mind of a champion. And if we tap into that, we can take the lessons we learn in the martial arts world and apply them to everyday life.
You know, it's really funny because you and I talk about this a lot, how our paths in certain areas are very parallel. You know, I ran into you at one of our events, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, and you were telling me, we were talking about stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to do that, because I'm doing some similar stuff, right? And there's so many lessons that can be learned from martial arts. But I wanted to kind of go back. You are, kind of in time. One of the things that guys from years of my generation, I'm a few years older than you, but not that much older, is that a lot of our peers aren't training anymore.
That's so true. That's so true.
And for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is they maybe didn't respect their body. Good people, but didn't respect their body, and so you're a very fit guy. You've always that's always been a priority. But also you were a high level collegiate athlete. You were a center linebacker.
I was an inside linebacker at Northwestern University.
Is there even a center linebacker?
There is not. No, but that's okay. There's an offensive center, but not a center linebacker.
Now, does that involve a baseball and a basket? No, okay, just kidding. So, clearly you don't get to that level without having some natural skills, and you converted that to martial arts. But so we're going to cover a lot of stuff today. But what I wanted to talk about is kind of your overview, how you've. I'm sure you have aches and pains. I know you have aches and pains because we've talked about it. Right? But what have you done to allow yourself to really be able to still perform at a high level at your senior age?
Senior age. Well, there's several things. I think, in fact, I was given a presentation a couple of years ago. I was co-facilitating with a buddy of mine who's a personal trainer, and we were getting ready to talk to this men's group. And he and I were having this conversation, and I don't know if I said it first or he said it first, but he said, we talk about all this exercise and things we're doing, but it really comes down to diet, And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I think as the older that we get, being really disciplined in our nutrition is just so important. And I kind of backed into that because I had allergies with wheat and gluten and dairy. So I had to really look at my nutrition. But man, I'll tell you what, it's something that I'm very disciplined about.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also just about staying active consistently.
Yeah.
You know,
the word consistent, I want to just touch on nutrition for a minute, because, someone will say, well, I do, I don't know what's your particular, what you kind of, your particular method you follow, but you hear it all, right?
Yeah.
All over the place. And if you read the books like you have and I have, it's very confusing. And if you had 10 nutritionists from different colleges throughout the world, none of them would agree on anything.
That's right.
But what happens was you're mindfully aware of how you eat. You naturally are going to eat better.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. Whatever the diet. I did it because I did paleo. No, I'm a strict vegan. No, I only do raw food. I do nothing but steak. That's it. Like with Jordan Peterson diet for a while.
Right.
But anybody that's doing any of those, guess what they're doing? They're mindful of what they're eating.
Exactly.
And most of us don't have a cupcake diet.
Well, and it's so true. And in fact, one of the things we do in our black belt testings is we have our candidates go through a week of clean eating, right? And one of the things I tell them is before you do that, do an inventory of what you eat the week before. And you will be amazed at how unconscious you are about putting things in your mouth. So you're right, it is about mindful. I think for me, it also helps to have a really solid routine in terms of what I do. And I do a lot of meal prep and things like that. So that way I don't have to think about it and make bad choices.
Well,
it's already done.
Especially in our lifestyle, the martial arts lifestyle, where you teach until 9:30 at night, and you forgot to bring a snack, and you haven't eaten since noon, and you're hungry, and you friggin' open up the refrigerator and you will devour everything, everything. So some of the rules that I kind of follow personally, I love this mantra, is that I kind of follow, eat clean during the week, and on weekends I'm not as worried.
Right.
But the mantra, rather than looking at a piece of chocolate cake and going, oh, I deserve it, I work so hard, oh, well, because you're going to give in every time. My mantra is, being healthy and fit feels better than that tastes.
That's right. That's
and
right.
it kind of is like, and if you like chocolate cake, hey man, have chocolate cake, just have it less often and not as big a portions.
Yeah. I have something very similar, because having difficulty with dairy in my diet, and I grew up in Wisconsin, by the way, so that's a tough one, but I do the same thing. It's like, wow, that little bit of personal gratification, I'm going to pay for it later, and that's how I reverse that. So.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is so important, and is along this lines, is the importance of hydration, because dehydration is linked with irritability, fatigue, and hunger. So if you ever felt any of these, sometimes you just made another few ounces of water, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the last one that I really try to stress is mindful eating, which basically means eating smaller portions and slower, and which is hard to do. And I struggle with this one, but true story. A while back, I was teaching at the school, and I didn't bring anything with me home. And I get home, and my wife's made this pesto pasta, and I'm ready to eat the whole bowl, man. And willpower is gone. It's going down, and I'm about halfway through this bowl, and there's probably 2,800 calories of pasta in there. About halfway through this bowl, I get a call from an old friend I hadn't talked to for several years, and we have this great conversation, and for about 20 minutes, half hour, I hang up the phone, and guess what? I'm full.
That's right.
Because it takes a while for the body to feel satiated.
Sure.
And sometimes we just, by eating slower, the Japanese had a term, harihachibu. Harihachibu means 80% full, right? Eat until you're not hungry versus till you're full.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's and I had the same thing. I mean, it's easy to get unconscious about it when I take my mind off it. Several years ago, I did this retreat in Estes Park, Colorado, with Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah,
okay?
Wow.
And every meal had to be eaten mindfully, where we would take one bite and then set our fork down as we chewed. And then during the time, at least once during the meal, the monastics would come up and ring a bell, and everyone had to stop and place their fork down and just sit there for a minute. And that was a big experience for me, because I guess I up until then, particularly when I played football in college, I was constantly trying to gain weight. So I was always looking for something to eat. And now I was like, wow, I can slow down and be a little more mindful about this.
Yeah. My mindful eating story has to do with 15 years ago. My daughter's 10, my son's 13, and at that time she went through this baking phase, and she makes these amazing chocolate chip cookies, right? And it's Saturday afternoon, I can eat whatever I want. I'm off to teach an instructor's seminar that afternoon in one of the schools, and when I leave the house, you can smell the aroma of chocolate chip cookies in the oven, and I think to myself, when I get back, I'm going to eat the whole tray. So I get back 2.5 hours later. My son ate every cookie except for one. And it's like, And what do? Do I like what do I do with that last cookie? I don't go. I don't just scarf it down. What do? I pick it up and I taste it and I eat the corner and I savored it. And I probably enjoyed that one cookie more than I would have the 12 I was planning on eating.
Absolutely. Totally get that. Totally get that.
And so it's really not that complicated, right? I mean, you obviously, you know, not to digress into different, but you try to eat a lot of, vegetables and fruit and, stuff low on the food chain with not a lot of big words in it, and then try to eat slower and eat in moderation.
Yeah, I've actually heard something that goes like this. It's if it comes from a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't eat it.
I love it.
Right?
I love it. Yeah. And bottom line is I'm still going to eat something that was made in a plant upon occasion, but that shouldn't be the majority of I eat. Right. For example, if I pull up an apple in my hand, how many ingredients in an apple? Apple. But if I pull up a power bar, there's a lot of big words I can't understand. That's right. You try to eat less of those.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell me about your exercise routine, because I know that's part of it. And by the way, you say, the guy that you were telling you about, it's really about nutrition. This is probably a guy that exercises easily.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But a lot of people, you and I, although I'm sure you don't always oh, great, I get to work out, but it's part of what we do. And we have the discipline to do it, and we're always, it's easier for us than others. So what would you tell someone that men, they don't like working out. They don't like going to the gym. It's hard for them.
Well, I love the distinction. I have a good friend of mine who's a naturopathic doctor and also a former triathlete, and he makes the distinction from calling it exercise to calling it movement.
Love it.
So our bodies were designed to move. So what is the way that you enjoy moving?
Love it.
And if you can find that, then just get into that rhythm. It could be walking, it could be resistance training, it could be whatever. But many people, I think, exercise because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And if they don't like it, they're not going to do it long term. Yeah. So find something you love to do to move.
I love the idea of movement. And by the way, what's the best movement, or what's the best exercise? The one you'll do.
That's right.
The one you'll do. And I'm amazed by how many people think, and by the way, this is really common for guys that were athletic in school, and now they got out of school, they got a job, a career, busy schedule. All of a sudden, they're 40 years old, they're out of shape, and in their mind, just doing a 15 or 20 minute workout is not enough, because they're thinking about the two a days they did when they were a kid, and which is, as my dad taught me about exercise, a little something's better than a lot of nothing. And you said consistency. My formula personally, and like I said, it's different. If you're getting ready to, if you're an athlete and you have to perform at a high level, you sometimes have to push it. But I'm just training for life. I'm trained to feel good. And so if I consistently overtrain, we know that's bad. Mm-hmm. If I inconsistently overtrain, that's not very good either. If I inconsistently undertrain, it's a waste of time. So the sweet spot is consistently, but undertrain. What I mean by undertrain is not take it to failure. You know what I'm saying? Like not overdo, because that's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's about doing the movements that I love doing. And there's also something that I think the time of day for me, I attempt to get all my workouts in, with the exception of some kicking stuff, martial arts stuff I do in the afternoons, is to get them done almost first thing in the morning.
100% me too.
Because so many times life happens, and we say, hey, we're going to do it at noon, and then we get a call, and pretty soon we're putting it off. And when I coach people about this, I say, hey, if you miss a day, it's not a big deal. Just don't miss 2 days.
It's so funny that you say that. We are right now, we're speaking from our ProMac International conference, and thank you for being a part of this, by the way. And this is day 3. And I almost never miss one day of workout. Well, I did work out today, a light workout, but I didn't really work out yet. I did a token warm up, and I didn't the day before, and I could give you a million excuses. I'm not worried about it because it's so part of what I do. It's going to happen, but I feel it. Because it's that second day, because now all of a sudden you're falling out of habit.
That's right.
And I think the way to look at exercise, hear people say, well, I'm going to try to get to the gym 3 days a week. The way I look at it is, do you try to eat 3 days a week? No. Do you try to sleep 3 days a week? I think, in my opinion, you should move every day. Now, it might be different. And then, unless you have a reason not to, it's a shift. It's not, I'm gonna try to find time to exercise when I can. No. when I don't have to, if I can't fit in the workout, I won't. Otherwise, I just work out every day because that takes the elimination. Should I train today or not? Well, if you do it every day, you're going to do it.
The best way to be in shape is to stay in shape, right? It's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that when I owned my school, I remember our very good friend Tom Callis said, you know, you need to consider yourself as a professional athlete. And I really took that to heart. And then, of course, I started thinking about, and hopefully my staff reflect, I know yours does as well, is we're the product.
Yeah.
So if I'm speaking to somebody, particularly a man in his 40s, whatever, and we're talking about the properness of physical conditioning and staying, we have to be able to live that lifestyle. Yeah. And it just, you know, there's just so much about it too that it makes me sharper. It makes me feel better about myself. It's just,
And then the other thing that you will hear, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation earlier today with one of my part-time staff members. It's a person that's aging, and they're part-time. They got a full-time career. They've been volunteering for us forever. It's great to have that school. And I was asking her how her fitness training is going. She goes, I'm only when I teach a couple times a week, I've got all this stuff going on. I'm taking care of my mom and this and that. And I kind of had to remind her, do you really believe that? Because you know what you can do. The Pavel, the Russian stagecoach, talked about a concept called grease the groove, and basically what that means is every hour do 10 push-ups.
That's right. Yeah.
The next day, every hour, do 10 squats. And I kind of went through. You can find the time. You know, you don't need a lot of time to. And so it's very easy for people to make excuses. And here's what I was going at: is that a lot of times guys will make excuses because they have injuries. Right. And I'm sure you have too. And if the student is ready, their teacher will appear. And what I mean is sometimes it's not. I don't. Unless I know someone really well, I know it's the right thing. I don't comment on, you know, I like in this particular case, I could give her some pushback because I know her and we have rapport. But how many bogus excuses have you heard from people about why they can't work out?
That's right. Exactly. Well, you know, it's a justification because I think that in essence, they know what the right answer is, and they need to justify it in order to, you know, justify that behavior. But again, a little bit of something is better than a lot of nothing. Yeah. And so I just think it's so important. And again, it's like, for me, and I think you're probably the same way, is routine is just huge for me. I mean, when I started doing research, you know, as I was beginning speaking and whatever, and I was looking at people that were having successful experiences in life, business, they all had morning routines. Mm-hmm. And I said, man, I got to get on this. And that's something that I do. It's the first thing I do as soon as I wake up.
Yeah, well, we're going to get back to that because I also have a morning routine. And I also know that that's like key. And almost every successful person, there's a few exceptions, always a few outliers that they have that part, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, and back just kind of finishing up the exercise concept. And that is that I would also remind someone, you say, but you guys don't understand, you know, I have a bad knee, you know, or my shoulder doesn't work and stuff like that, is that first and foremost, there's always probably something that you can do, right? But also sometimes you can use that as an excuse. And I'm not, you know your body, and you know when the movement you're doing, because you're an athlete and you're very fine tuned and aware of it. You know when the motion you shouldn't do it, and when it's just sore and you have to work around it. But if I never exercised when I was injured or sore, I would never exercise.
I'm the same way.
It would never happen because there's always something, you know, that comes from a lifetime of, you know.
And maybe this is my football background, but I remember my high school coach used to say there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. Right? So sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable and then you warm up, it's fine. There are certain things, you're injured, you have to avoid movement, totally there.
Yeah. And so, but it's just, and you know, you gotta take inventory. Is your excuse legitimate or not? And when you do that, it's often, you know, I'm just a story I'm telling myself. Mm-hmm. It's a belief that isn't really true, and maybe other people believe it, but you know better, man. Find a way, you know, and I think this is important, is that for some people it's like exercise, and you know, we're all wired different. There's some things for me that are a lot of work that it doesn't matter. You can tell me why I should do it. It's still not it's not gonna work for me. But with this, it's kind of like, what we have to understand is that you don't pay the price for exercise, you reap the benefits, and the world needs you to do that so that you can be a better husband, wife, father, boss. You know, because I don't know about you, I'm a way better at all my, you know, different positions in the world when I'm feeling good about myself, when I'm feeling healthy. Yeah.
And I just think one thing, and when I coach people on this too, it's about making those most important things scheduled in your calendar. Yeah. It's there. And then other things work around it. You don't go to your fitness training, you're working out when you get around to it, or when you have more time. It becomes an anchor in your calendar, and then you work your other things around. That's just how I live.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because so often in the martial arts world, this, when someone registers, a school owner will, with pride, tell the students, you can come, there's classes 6 days a week, here's the different slots, you can come whenever you want. Well, whenever you want is when I get around to it. And so you want someone to be successful, it's like, all right, Chris, thanks for enrolling the school, and you're we have this really nice schedule. Let's figure out the 2 days you're going to come that I can count on you. And because now, and eventually if you want to add on, now I'm helping you develop the right habits. The same thing for exercise. It's like you have to like draw a line in the sand and figure these times, and it doesn't have to be long. And some people, I don't have time to go to the gym. Well, in their mind, they're going to drive a half an hour to the gym and park as close to the front as they can to walk inside and do the treadmill for a half an hour and walk back. Like you just bust out some squats, and try doing 20 burpees and see how you feel, right?
Yeah. Well, there's many studies now that I see about it's more efficient to be doing more activity in short bursts throughout the day than, and I've actually looked at that and said, maybe I need to look at things a little differently, because I'll get in a really good workout first thing in the morning, but then I'm pretty sedentary the rest of the day on my computer. So I think there's some balance there.
Yeah. Well, my workouts have shifted to my resistance training, because I do first thing in the morning too, is that I have a set warm up that's exactly the same, that never changes, and it's funny because when I pull a muscle, it's almost every time is when I forgot to do that warm up, and then my routine in the middle, which is my resistance, and it's very high intense but short, and then I do this exact same warm down and moving, some postures that I'm going to do, etc. But the middle part, the intense part, is maybe 20 minutes, right? But that's enough.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Enough.
I did some resistance training today in the hotel. It was 20 minutes.
Yeah. And by the way, maybe could you have gone more? Yeah. But there comes a point where you've done enough. You get to that set point where the feeling.
Yeah.
I don't really need to do a lot more than that. I got the heart rate up. I got I fatigued the muscle group, and doing 18 more sets is maybe when you're 22, but when you're old, that's not always going to benefit you.
That's so true.
So let's switch gears. So you, one of the things that's always impressed of me about you is you have this this great attitude about life, and I'm sure you were maybe born into that to a certain degree, but you've clearly worked on yourself. You know what I'm saying? You've clearly said, I want to be better. What do I got to do? You've been very introspective in your approach about how you live your life. And so give us some ideas, like what do you, where have you come? It's kind of in your mental, emotional journey. How did you get there, and what are you doing forward?
It really started when I decided I was going to leave the corporate world and move into being a professional martial arts instructor. And I went through, I was exposed to a new thought.
Was it Procter & Gamble?
I was with Procter & Gamble for 10 years, and it was a great experience. And I loved the people there, and I was doing very well. But I had this huge desire to own my own school. And actually, my wife at the time, we're no longer together, but she had been my high school sweetheart, and she was the one that was encouraging me to do this. So right around that time, I found New Thought philosophy, Science of Mind and Spirit. And it was just this beautiful time for me, because I went through a lot of anxiety in making that move. I had 2 young sons. I was the only breadwinner. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And all I could think about is, if I fail at this, the whole world's going to end. And so what it caused me to do is look at myself and say, okay, there's something going on here that's a little bit deeper than just an average fear, because I actually went into panic attacks and things like that. And so it kind of took me down this road. And then what I found out later on is that many of the things that I was learning in martial arts had a lot of similarity to that. And it was just became part of who I was. And now when I think about one of the reasons my school was as successful as it certainly was because of my marketing. It was about all those other things. It was about who I was being. I was feeling I was feeling joyful in what I was doing. I was feeling I was on purpose when I was doing it. And my intention was to use martial arts as a vehicle for other people to have that same type of experience, whether they were a kid or an adult. Yeah. And it's then turned into what I do when I speak and I life coach now. It's the same stuff that I'm doing, just in a different way.
Yeah, well, I believe there's 3 types of motivation. You can be motivated by desperation, and I'm sure you've been there. I've certainly been there. And you can be motivated by inspiration. You hear a podcast, you go to a seminar, who knows, you wake up and you saw the light. But the problem with both of those, by the way, inspiration is way better than desperation, is they're both temporary.
That's right.
But when your purpose is clear, that will sustain you through the highs and lows, and that's what you identify. Yeah. Hey, this is my job at Procter & Gamble is great. These are nice people. And by the way, I'm sure that there's a story about how you're helping the world through that. I'm sure there is, but it's not quite as obvious and quick and apparent as when you're helping people be better people.
Well, it was really funny because probably about 4 years ago, I ran into my old boss, got reconnected with him, my last boss at P&G. And then he connected us with my former boss's boss when I was working in LA. And we all went out to lunch, had a great time together. And I remember one of them saying, "Hey, Chris, tell Mike what you're doing right now." And I started talking, and I realized, wow, I would have never done that. Even though I was doing well, I was serving people, to the amount of people that I've been able to impact in martial arts, it's not even close. And we all have those stories, right? Yeah. That student that just was, they were forlorn, they were just not on purpose, they were misdirected, and we were able to do that. And it just made me go, wow, yeah, this was a pretty good lunch. Yeah. Because I got to reflect on, the impact I've been able to make.
Well, yeah, I think that's really important too, is that it's so often to let, gravity will pull you down. There's so much negativity out there. And there's the reason why we're attracted to negativity is because it kept our ancestors alive.
Absolutely,
as a
kept
species.
us alive, no doubt.
Yeah, but with that said, it's like, it's really hard to kind of, so sometimes we end up focusing on the 3% of our life that's not right versus the 97% that isn't, exactly. And if we can just, kind of take a moment and think about how far we came. That helps us because grateful people are fun to be around, and grateful people tend to be happy people as well. And
sure
so, we just kind of every now and then take inventory of what we've accomplished, and maybe there's always more to do. But I think it's also important that people understand that we're never gonna be there.
Right.
We're always arriving.
Right. And that's part of it. I think when we look at life that way, where it is not about arriving somewhere, but it's about enjoying that journey. And I know that might even sound cliche.
Cliche means there's truth behind it.
There's truth behind it, right? Because then what happens is we start to see other areas of opportunity for us to expand into that maybe we didn't see before. Mm-hmm. So I think having a growth mindset as a martial arts master and a martial arts school owner is absolutely imperative. I think that one of the things we can best model for our students is that we're always on a path of growth in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, there's a story about this. I'm going to get a couple stories mixed up, but basically how it's about a pastor, a small town pastor, and about how basically he wasn't a very flamboyant pastor, but that people followed him because his life was his sermon. Mm-hmm. He was actually living the life. He was doing his best, and that's not always easy to do. But for me, I don't know about you, but the morning routine, we'll talk about that now. Is that I think that really sets my day, and it started for me when my kids were little, and I had. I had no choice but get up way before them, and now I hold true to it. And I don't set my alarm because I get up organically, but usually for me it's between 4:45 and 5 o'clock.
Same here.
Okay.
Same here.
And the first thing I do is I get up. My vice is I like a hot cup of black coffee in the morning. I perk my coffee. I sit down. I have 3 different things that I read that are daily affirmational stuff, and one is biblically based, one is based on Stoicism, the Daily Stoic with Ryan Holiday, and then I do my journaling, and then I what am I grateful for? You're laughing because
I'm laughing because it's like the same routine.
I knew I liked you, right? But then I do my workout, right?
Yeah,
and I go and then I come back, and by the way, I haven't even looked at my phone yet.
Yeah.
I haven't even looked at my phone yet because inevitably I don't want that to throw me off.
Right.
And
Right.
otherwise you just, you're not able to set. Then when I get back, now I'm back from the gym. I fix my breakfast. It's usually about 7:15, 7:30. And that's when I kind of pull up my phone, look at my emails.
Love it. Yeah. Well, what I do, I actually wrote about it in my second book. I call it the 6 M's of morning mastery.
Okay.
6 M's. So the first one is meditation.
Okay.
So it's the first thing I do. Then I do mental imaging.
Okay.
So I'm imagining what I want to do for that day. I do something I call mind treatment. So it's affirmations and spiritual mind treatment, if you will. Then movement. I do some sort of movement. I'll listen to or read. So I have motivation.
Okay.
And then the last one is memoirs. I'll do journaling.
Okay.
So
I was going to say meal. That could be the seventh one.
That could be the seventh one.
Memoirs, journaling. I love it. That's such a great formula. Actually, I want to get that from you. I think it's a really good one. I actually did. I always wanted, as a martial artist, I always felt like I should meditate, right? But I could never get myself to meditate. So finally, 28 years ago, I did TM.
Okay.
And I stuck with it because, darn it, I paid for it. I'm going to do it. And I created this habit for almost 20 years. I did my 20 minutes twice a day. Yeah. I'm less consistent now. I still do every day, but I'm okay with it. It's kind of like, I don't feel. A lot of my life seems to be more meditative.
Well, what I was going to say is if you're in a mindful state as a result of that, it's like being in a walking meditation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I still, as I speak that, I don't want to be hypocritical. There's a story about Gandhi and the sugar. Have you heard the story? Familiar with the story? For those of you guys out in the listening, it's some lady brings her son to Gandhi and says, "Would you tell him to quit eating sugar?" And Gandhi says, "Come back in a week." The lady goes, "Okay." She comes back in a week, and Gandhi says, "Quit eating sugar." And the lady goes, "Well, why couldn't you tell them that a week ago?" And the answer is, well, because a week ago I was eating sugar. So this is an area that I've kind of let go maybe more than I should have, and I do need to get back to it more consistently. Right. But I'll tell you what, when I started doing it, it was a point in my life when I so needed it, and I am really good now at taking those moments to savor. Because meditate, you don't have to be in a lotus position with your back straight to meditate.
Right.
You can be just hanging out in the backyard, just enjoying the sound of the wind blowing and the birds. And I find the one thing is that I don't like and when I run and walk, I personally don't listen to music. It's because I feel like I'm distracted. I'm not like present in that moment.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I did the event with Thich Nhat Hanh that I mentioned before, they talked about in the monastery, the monastics, that there were no dishwashers, automatic dishwashers, because he wanted everyone to wash dishes manually so they'd be present. So it's meditation, right?
100%.
Just one focused thought and activity.
Yeah, and anything can be that. It's like I want to be respectful of your time, and we're gonna wrap up. But I wanted to talk about a word and how it relates to you and think about it. And it has to do with my father, who every time was a World War II vet and was a prisoner of war in Nazi Germany, has this amazing story, Death March and Near Firing Squad. And he came back, a lot of people would come back bitter, and he came back better. He just had this appreciation for life that was really amazing. And every time we get together as a family, also later years, he was a psychotherapist. His early years, he was a minister for 50 years, right? And so we'd gather around the table, and before, he'd always say, "Look around. These are the good old days." And these are the good old days, right? That's right. But if I was to sum it up, the word would be savor.
Yes.
I love that word because it brings you the present moment with a sense of appreciation. Actually, Thich Nhat Hanh has a book called Savor. Yes. And but for me, that's a way for these little moments to be meditative. Is just take a moment and just kind of savor a meal with a friend, savor a sunset, etc. So your kind of take on little ways to appreciate the journey.
Wow. Well, first of all, I loved your dad. I mean, I met him on a couple of occasions, just thought the world of him. And I think that, I've either had friends, and you have as well, that have lost some people in their lives, lost kids, etc. And when you hear people talk about those people that they've lost, they generally talk about those little moments that you're talking about. That's what they remember. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that come up. And I think it's so important for us to take time, and particularly when we are with people that mean a lot to us and we love a lot, is to just be with them. Not have a cell phone in our hand or watching TV out of the corner of our eye. And I'm not saying it's easy for me. Yeah. it can be really difficult. But how many times I'll just give you this one story from my own background, which really was life-changing for me. I lost my brother when I was 17 years old. He was 11. And he had been by today's standards, he'd be ADHD. Okay. We just didn't diagnose it back then. And he had gone away to a church camp the week before I was getting ready to leave on a football camp. So we literally crossed paths on a Sunday. And we're sitting there and he's telling me all about this camp and he just loved it. And it was at that time in our lives where I was like, this kid's really a pain in the butt. But for whatever reason, I just sat with him. And I remember we finished our conversation after he told me what had gone on. And I thought, I kind of like him. He's a pretty neat kid. So anyway, I get off and I go to my camp. I'm there the weekend. When I come back that Friday, there's a note on the door from my mom saying that there's been a tragedy in the family, and come to find out 2 hours before he had drowned, right? And I tell that story because I've always been so grateful that I took the time with him. I could have done what I had always done before, like, yeah, whatever, and blown him off. But for whatever reason, I felt compelled to stay with there. Even, I don't know how long that conversation was, 15, 20 minutes. And that's my last memory of my brother.
So cool.
So it's like, people listening out there, take time.
I mean, we hear about this all the time, but it's so true. Is that like what I'm really focusing on is I'm generally a friendly person and I like people and I like to be around people, but I tend to, sometimes someone comes up and says hi, I'm kind of preoccupied, and I like to really focusing on if I'm going to spend and there's actually a phrase in the Japanese tea ceremony, it's ichigo ichi. And ichigo ichi roughly translated means one chance, one encounter. And what it means is this is the only time on in Sacramento that I get to speak with Chris Natzke about life and stuff, and I really owe the listeners, but also you, my presence, to really be here and savor this time.
And when you think about, I know you're a parent, obviously I am as well. If you think about, at least when I've observed the best parents, they're the ones that are present with their kids. And as a result of that, their kids grow up and they have lasting relationships with them because they built that as a premise of the relationship is presence. I just think it's really powerful.
And giving them presence is not as important as presence. And then also, not passing judgment on them. And I think to tie this in, because a lot of these guys are professional martial artists, is same thing with your team.
Totally.
And your students. It's like, the most important thing is not how, it's Zig Ziglar 101. It's not how much you care about, how's it go? It's not, people don't care how much you know, they know how much they care how much, how people don't
care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Thank you so much for that. But that's so true. And one of the things that we can do to our business, wherever you're at, and your family is be present with them and do the best you can. Easy to say, hard to do, but worthy of the challenge. And that is to be not judgmental, really to hear what they have to say, and people appreciate being appreciated.
Well, and I was so honored you invited me to speak at the conference this week, and my talk was on communication. Right. And that's one of the things that I talk to them, school owners, about their staff members, is have that connection. And I used to be the kind of guy when we'd have a staff meeting, I'd sit at the head of the table and go, all right, everyone, we've got a lot to cover. And I just go right into it. And then I learned from a friend of mine who was running a business to go around the table and do a check-in with everyone. Just that little bit. And it just transformed our meetings and our staff.
And I think just on that, it's not just to go through the motions,
right,
but to really do a check. It's one thing to check a box off. Right. Okay, ask everybody how they're doing. Oh, how you doing? Okay, got that. It didn't work, didn't help at all. But to really mean that, that to bring your spirit present. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being part of it. If I wanted to get a hold of you, I wanted you to come and speak at my event or hire you to get some coaching, where would I go?
Yeah, just thanks for asking. Just go to chrisnatzke.com. So CHRIS, N as in Navy, ATZ as in zebra.com.
So I knew you were going to tell me that because that's kind of one of those names.
It is, it's one of those. I mean, usually most people spell it SKI, right? But ZKE is how it ends.
ZKE. I'll tell you what, I've known you forever, and I always have to go, now how's that again? For me, it was always, if I don't tell people, it's COBER.
Oh,
Kovar.
got it.
Kovar. That's how people.
Right.
I have to
That's
say.
right.
That's how I have to go with it. All right, man. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, absolutely.
All right, take care.
Thank you for tuning in today to our podcast. I hope you found it valuable and inspirational. To stay connected, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a 5-star review. And we really sincerely would appreciate some feedback. Your feedback helps us to create high-quality content that will help others in the future. If you'd like to follow me, you can go to Dave Kovar on Facebook or Hunchy Dave Kovar on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on next episode.